Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, it's a very big day in Canada. And as we speak, it looks like Mark Carney has indeed retained his position as Canada's Prime Minister. But shockingly, Jagmeet Singh has lost his seat. What is this going to mean for Canada's huge Sikh community? We take a look at how the parties stack up in the specific key issues Sikhs care about. And in California, we take a look at sword fighting in gang warfare of all things and how Sikhs were involved, leading to what was called Operation Broken Sword. More on that in a moment. And here in the UK, with the rise of anti-Sikh hate crime on TikTok, a prestigious Sikh legal body sends out its warning. Well, all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks for all your amazing comments. Thank you for keeping them coming. Don't forget that we have passed 26,000 subscribers, but we're greedy. We always want more. So if you can help us by sharing the channel with your friends and family, colleagues, and others, by all means, let them know all about the show and invite them to join us. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, please do that, because every day, James and I together, we bring you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual today, we'll be taking a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the video. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, lots to get through today. What are you going to start us off with? I think I can guess.
Let's start with the big news out of British Columbia. Of course, the election results are not finalized, but it is pretty clear it's going to be a Liberal mandate. It is going to be the Liberals taking that seat and Mark Carney retaining the leadership of the country. The sad part for me, though, is that Jagmeet Singh lost his seat in Burnaby, something I kind of predicted might happen between the Conservatives, the Greens, and the NDP. But it's still, I was holding out hope for him because he has been such an amazing force, not only for the Sikh community, but for Canadians as a whole. He has stood up in many different arenas across the country, including bringing in different programs such as helping with the $10 a day daycare program. He was assisting with that, but also for the dental program and expanded pharmacare for pharmaceutical coverage when it comes to life-saving medications. So it is really sad to see that not only has he lost his seat, but he is also giving up leadership of the NDP party. What lies next for him? Well, I think that a well-deserved break might be a good idea because, again, he's been going hard for years representing the needs and the best interests of Canadians. Now, Singh has traveled throughout the country to really push the agenda, but I think that the NDP maybe came in a little lackluster, I'll say. They really need to be more aggressive in the start, I believe. I think they need to be a bit more aggressive when it came to focusing on taking seats away from the Conservatives, which I was really hopeful that they would do. But again, it didn't come to fruition, especially as we look at the results that are coming in tonight. Now, Jagmeet went on to say tonight, in addition to, of course, his resignation, that it's been the honor of his life to represent the people of Burnaby Central. Tonight, they chose a new member of parliament, and tonight I wish them well as they continue to work hard for this community. And and that's just it. There was also further in, he said, obviously, I know this is a disappointing night for the NDP. We had a really good candidates who lost tonight. I know how hard you worked. I spent time with you. You are amazing. So again, really lifting up those in his party that maybe didn't get the results that they had wanted either. So with that said, of course, we know that Canada is on the precipice of change, and we need to have a strong mandate going forward. Whether that means that Mark Carney is going to have a vast majority in the House, we'll have to wait and see until all the results are in. But again, at this point, it's pretty much concluded the fact that Carney will proceed. When we look at the supply and confidence agreement that the Liberals entered into with the NDP back in 2022, the big part of that, again, was to bring in the pharmacare and the dental care for low-income Canadians, and programs that have since succeeded. So again, his time in office will be remembered. He was very successful, even though he wasn't leading as the Prime Minister. He definitely had a lot of impact, and that was a big part of that agreement that they had. Now, some people are calling on him, or calling him out, saying that he should have forced the election sooner once the resignation of Trudeau happened, or to even go further, to partner up with the Conservatives in a non-confidence vote of Trudeau earlier than it did happen. And of course, he is saying that no, he stands by his decision. He made that choice knowingly and willingly. He knew what was at stake, and he felt that it was not in the best interest of Canadians. It might have been in the best interest of the NDP or for himself, but it was not in the best interest of Canadians. And that's what he had in his heart when he made that decision. So again, it is, with sad heart that we see him leaving as leader of the NDP. As for myself, as a Canadian, I wish him nothing but great things in his future, and for his family. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, in terms of the Conservatives, they obviously had a lot of issues when it came to the perception that Pierre Poilievre was what they called mega maple, or, a Donald Trump 2.0 with less conviction. So again, it's not a surprise to see that they did not lead the polls and the results tonight when it came to who's going to lead the country forward. Now, of course, they will hold the opposition. They will be there to hold the Liberals to account. But I think the biggest mistake made, and this is something that I said earlier on before the election was even called, is that the Conservative Party needed a leadership change. I think that a lot of the distraction of the potential involvement of foreign interference that placed him as the leader of the party, and then the ongoing concerns of the transnational repression and foreign interference as we led up into this election, I think was a huge distraction. And also because of the major transition away from the Conservatives once Donald Trump started to lead the U.S. in his direction, and people saw that Pierre Poilievre was trying to basically run his campaign on bumper sticker slogans and repeating the following of Donald Trump. So again, I think that the biggest mistake the Conservatives made was sticking with Pierre Poilievre in this election. I think that if they had chosen a new leader, someone with fresh ideas, and actually came out with a solid plan that they were able to produce in the public and to back up in press conferences, I think it would have made a difference for the Conservatives. And again, that I think was their biggest downfall. The NDP, well, I think that it wasn't so much the leadership of Jagmeet Singh. I don't think it was any particular person that you could put a thumb on in terms of the reason that they fell short. As I said, I think that they didn't come out aggressive enough against the Conservatives or against the Liberals for that matter. But I also think that it was a matter of people trying to decide between the Conservatives and the Liberals and not seeing the NDP as a viable option to take the office of the Prime Minister. So I think that's where we see a lot of seats given up, was the fact that people wanted to make sure that it was an overwhelming majority, no matter which way it went, either Liberal or Conservative. So again, Angus, it is going to be interesting to see where things head in this time of change, and it's going to be interesting to watch how Mark Carney takes the country forward in dealing with everything from tariffs to NATO to there's just so many issues, not just between Canada and the U.S. but on a global stage. So I think that there's a lot to watch for. And I think the important thing that Canadians need to do now is just that. I think they need to watch. They need to demand that things are being met in terms of expectations, promises made on the election campaign trail, and in what is in the best interest of Canadians, and to reach out to your MPs when things are not going right and demand that they hold our leadership accountable. And that's the biggest thing that Canadians can do at this point, is try to put all the politics aside for a moment, take a deep breath, and realize that regardless as to who's leading our nation, we need to come together as one. We need to build a stronger Canada for tomorrow, for the next generation. And it's time to put all of this petty crap that we've seen, like trucker convoys and all that, that needs to be left in the past. We need to come together regardless of policy, regardless of party, and just build a stronger, better Canada for future generations, because that's what it's all about, Angus.
Yeah, I suppose like any general election, it always comes with shocks, surprises, horrors and what have you. And, well, it looks like this election is no exception to that. Jagmeet Singh, that's such bad news, isn't it? And I have to say, it came as a bit of a surprise. And it does look like, sadly, for the NDP, they have hemorrhaged seats. I think they've dropped from 24 down to a projected, I think it's 8 at the current moment. And of course, they do need to have 12 to be officially recognised sort of as a party within the Parliament itself. So they've really been hit hard in this election. And I gather, reading around very quickly this morning as the results are coming in, that the reason is that the party has hemorrhaged again a lot of its support to the Liberals, which is interesting. Bear in mind that the Liberals, by the looks of it, have only really just scraped over the line. I mean, it looks like they have secured a victory, but the real question is, have they got a minority government or a majority? And it is looking at this stage, as we go to press, that it is a minority government. Now, that in itself creates interesting dynamics in the situation going forward. Well, let's look at Pierre Poilievre. He apparently has refused to step down. It's maybe a slight surprise because in such a circumstance, it is quite usual for a party leader who's led the party to a failure, specifically and particularly when it was so far ahead. I think it was 20% ahead in the polls not that long ago, and it's crashed to a defeat in this election. So I'm sure that I have no doubt that behind the scenes the knives will be out for Poilievre, but he is, as many people like this do, he's clinging on with his fingernails. So I suspect, I wouldn't be surprised in the foreseeable that we see the end of Poilievre, despite his resilient attempts to cling on. But Mark Carney, you know my feelings about Mark Carney, and it does look like, yes, he is going to lead the next government, but it is likely it will be a minority government. Interesting, because of course, as a minority government, he is then going to rely on other parties to push forward, to push through legislation, particularly when the votes come close. He will be looking to parties like the NDP, despite even only having a few MPs, but those few MPs could be the critical mass that takes it over the line on various policies. So it does mean, bizarrely actually, in these situations, that a tiny party like the NDP can actually swing policy towards what it wants, because it says, look, if you want our votes, if you want to push this policy over the line, you need our votes, and this is what we want in return. So ironically, as it does turn out in situations like this, small parties like the NDP, even literally with only a handful of MPs, can literally influence large-scale policies. So that's not such a bad thing in the end. Now, Mark Carney, as I say, Mark Carney, he comes with his background of the World Economic Forum. He is not a politician. He's made mistakes. And it's interesting reading articles produced this morning, obviously in a rush as the results come in. People are saying, OK, he's actually had quite an easy ride, because if he had a longer run into an election, he would have been held to account a lot more closely. The scrutiny would have been a lot more fierce. As it is, the argument is maybe he should have called the election sooner. Well, he's called it when he did, and he has won the election, so I suppose the goal has been achieved. But could he have done better? Who knows? Right. But as I say, his background concerns me. The Liberal Party, which has, of course, secured a lot of votes from the NDP, they do sit on roughly on the same side of the political spectrum. They are more about the socialist aspect as opposed to sort of the hard, brutal, capitalist conservatives on the other side of the spectrum. But having said that, what does Carney stand for? We've talked a lot about that in past shows. I am concerned. We know what the Liberals stand for. That is good. And I think on the whole, they are a force for good. What is Mark Carney going to do? Well, I think there's a few clues in his speech he's just given. And as you were discussing, James, I did have a quick look as his speech came through and some key points. And he did say things like, for example, he told the crowd that he chose to enter politics because he thought Canada needed big changes, guided by strong Canadian values, humility, ambition and unity. Well, that's blah, blah, blah rhetoric. But the key message there is Canada needs big changes. Well, what does that mean? We don't know yet. So what is Carney bringing to the table? That worries me. He said, America wants our land, our resources, our water. These are not idle threats. Trump is trying to break us so America can own us. That will never happen. Well, again, it's more about this anti-Trump rhetoric. I've talked about how Trump forms this enemy, this existential threat to the World Economic Forum. We know that Carney is a member of the World Economic Forum. So no doubt he will be targeting Trump and he's trying to do his best to damage Trump as much as possible. But that is why he's actually won the election. He's used Trump as that dreadful bogeyman, which is why Canadians have rallied behind him. So that's the main reason that he has won this election. And he says, when I sit down with Trump, it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options to build prosperity for all Canadians. And he talks about strengthening relationships with Europe and Asia. Now, that's an interesting aspect to this one, James, because it does mean, well, OK, if he's not going to build bridges with America, with the United States, it means he's going to turn his attention on people like us over here on this side of the Atlantic and, of course, across in Asia. And maybe that also means building bridges with India. Who knows? That's maybe a slight concern. As I say, his agenda doesn't necessarily align with what Trudeau's agenda was. He comes from a very different background. And that's it's things like that do slightly concern me. Very early days, James, but it's fascinating to see. And as one of our commenters made their comment the other day, saying actually they hope that it doesn't matter who the leader is, it's what the party stands for. The party is more powerful than the leader. And if Carney does try to take the party in directions that the party as a whole is not comfortable with, they will rein him in. And if he doesn't get reined in, they will pull him down, James. So fascinating times.
It certainly is, Angus, and we're on the edge of change, as they say, but will it really be change or will it be the same old liberal stuff, right? That's the big question. So as we know, though, we've looked at one of the big election issues. Although the focus was distracted by tariffs and trade and geopolitical situations, the Ukraine-Russia war, the things in Israel and Gaza, so much to look at in such a short time. But something that's on the minds of all Canadians and Americans, of course, is the gang activity, the drug trade, and crime overall. As we know that there is a real issue when it comes to the criminal gang activities. And of course, the Bishnoi gang we spoke about last night and their potential connections to a lot of different activities, including the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, as we look at that, one of the big involvements or one of the big events over the last several years when it comes to the transnational gangs, when it comes to the different Indo-Canadian gangs, whether that is the Bishnoi gang or gangs known as the Minta or the AK-47 group, all had a role to play in Operation Broken Sword. Now, people will ask, what exactly was Operation Broken Sword? Essentially, what had happened is that several years back, there were several rival Sikh gangs that were going head-to-head in California. They started out with a rivalry that actually started, as I said, with violence, but they were fighting with swords originally. This, of course, escalated and grew, but one of the swords during that melee where there were arrests made and really triggered the long investigation into the criminality and these gangs, that's how they got the name. It was one of the broken swords from that particular event that kind of triggered the violence that was about to follow. Now, when you look at the Operation Broken Sword, as I said, there were two main gangs that were rivals in California, and they were identified as Sikh gangs. But let's remember that if they were genuinely practicing Sikhs, then it really goes counterculture, both by the use of drugs, the sale of drugs, the violence, just the whole thing is not what the Sikh community is about. So it really brings in, of course, that anybody of any culture can kind of get dragged into that. But I think the saving grace would be if they were to fall back to Sikhism, then they can find their way. If they go back to Sikhi, they can find guidance and get out of that. But that's all neither here nor there when it comes to this issue. So tonight we're going to talk about this Operation Broken Sword in a bit more detail, in the potential links to the Canadian gangs, and what that all entailed. Now, of course, as I said, the scope of Broken Sword was quite extensive, because not only were there areas of California in different counties that were experiencing these issues, but there was also a lot of implication into other series of violent incidents throughout the state. And again, whether they were trying to branch out into other areas with their international collaboration with the Mexican cartels, with Canadian gangs and such, that was a big concern as well. Now, let's look at this. Now, the Minta and the AK-47 group had splintered from a single larger organization. Now, these two rival criminal syndicates, they basically were groups that were implicated in violent incidents, including a shooting at a Sikh Gurdwara in Sacramento County in March of 2023. That prompted authorities to elevate their efforts, and the operation name, as I said, was inspired by that 2018 incident at the Sikh parade in Yuba City, which is just another smaller city in California. Now, one of the suspects' swords broke during a violent attack, symbolizing the fractured nature of the warring factions. Now, the coordinated takedown involved approximately 500 law enforcement officials, and the results ended up being with a seizure of 41 firearms, including AR-15 and AK-47, at least one machine gun, and many handguns. Now, the operation was, the aim of it was to curb the escalating violence that began with a fist fight and sword fights and just progressed into shootings and attempted murders. Now, at the 2018 Yuba City Sikh parade, that again seemed to be the igniting point, but it continued for several years past that. At the time, Yuba City Police Chief Brian Baker emphasized the operation's goal was to ensure the safety of the annual Sikh celebration in Sutter County, which attracts about 100,000 attendees globally. And the district attorney was also involved with their department. Her name was Jennifer Dupree, and she noted the motive behind the violence was unclear, but the groups appeared to target each other at various locations and then engaging in retaliatory shootings. So again, it was a big concern, and when they made some major arrests, it appears that there was another targeted parade event and other public events that they were looking to actually break out mass violence, which could have resulted if that Operation Broken Sword was not happening. It could have actually led to a mass casualty event against Sikhs practicing their faith and honoring with the Sikh parade. So again, it really played an instrumental part to protect the community overall. As you can see, though, the ridiculousness of people who associate this with the Khalistan referendum and the pro-Khalistan movement is very simply this, is that, as we discussed, the Lawrence Bishnoi gang has been used by the government of India to actually go after the Sikh community and the Khalistan community. So with their ties, both in British Columbia, Ontario and Alberta, Canada, they also had a presence or connections with the United Nations gang, the Independent Soldiers, the Red Scorpions, and of course the Lawrence Bishnoi gang in itself has a presence in BC. So again, this is a big part of what people are misrepresenting as part of the Khalistani movement. Not at all. It is just other gangs and criminality that is intermixing with a certain part of the community that gets blamed for it. And that is not fair. It's as though, or it would be the same as looking at certain ethnic groups or Caucasian groups, such as maybe, the Hells Angels historically, or others, and saying that you've got to avoid all white people because they're in this gang, or you've got to avoid all Japanese people because they may be a part of, the Japanese mob. So again, we need to make sure that we stand up and define whether or not they are Sikh, whether or not they are Indian, whether or not they are Hispanic or anything else. We need to make sure that they are not utilizing these gang activities or these events to paint the entire community with one brush, because that is not right. And unfortunately, recently we've seen the FBI in California and elsewhere trying to identify certain individuals who have been arrested as pro-Khalistan. And that, again, is trying to misrepresent the community, the democratic and peaceful transition or movement of the Khalistan group. So again, it is something to keep in mind and something that needs to be looked at. Now, there is other information here, but I'm not going to get into it all. I'll just kind of scroll it on the screen so you can pause your screen and look at it if you wish. But again, I'm going to just kind of scoot through this because in the interest of time, this was a very big event, and I'll cover a bit more of it tomorrow night as we continue to look at how the certain authorities are trying to misrepresent the Sikh community and the pro-Khalistan movement as a criminal or terrorist organization. And we really can suspect that that is just coming through from the India government and the RSS, the RAW organization and such, putting pressure on American or other international politicians, again, trying to push that divide and that misinformation, the disinformation, to break that trust that the Sikhs have with the community. But I think that we are smarter than that, and I think that the Sikh community is much stronger and really has a lot more support than India can ever realize, Angus.
Yes, I think any story that involves human beings has lots of different ingredients, and of course the main ingredients are basically human nature. We're all different. Doesn't matter what community we belong to, doesn't even matter what genes we have. That's ultimately right. We are all individual and we are different. And when you collect individuals into a group, of course that group is going to have different factions. It is going to have the good and it's going to have the bad. And quite often we do, particularly our critics, point to, but look at these Sikhs, they've done this and that and the other. And as I say every single time that crops up, well, of course, there are always going to be bad people within the community. It's just human nature. That's how nature has evolved us all. That is just a fact of life. And it is beholden on the good parts of that community to pressurise the bad parts of the community to conform and comply and behave themselves, in simple terms. So it is likely that within the Sikh community, particularly globally, there are going to be some bad elements, and it is impossible to drive those bad elements out. They are always going to exist. As long as human beings exist, bad elements are going to exist. But what is beholden upon a civilized society and a civilized community like the Sikh community is to try their very best to rein in those the bad individuals. And of course, the other ingredients involved here are young men. Young men are fueled by testosterone. They're fueled by this through the history of humanity. That's how wars start, is because particularly young men just feel the urge to fight, to go out there, to exert their alpha maleness. It's just driven by simple hormones. So add that into the mix, and of course you're always going to get things like that grow up into gang warfare, and on a larger scale into international conflict. That's basically the truth, the sad fact about humanity. It is unavoidable. Humanity sadly has been at war since we ever existed on this planet, whether it's between villages, whether it's between countries or whatever. And no doubt when we spread to the universe it will be between planets. We just cannot help ourselves. However, However, what we do very well is we establish religions, for example, like the Sikh religion, which has formed this sort of this backbone, this foundation of goodness in humanity to try and rein in the bad elements, whether it is within their own community or whether it is outside their own community. And that is really what matters going forward, and it's all about expanding that. Now, up against all this, of course, we have the misinformation problem, James. Key word that you brought out there very pointedly and rightly so. We are up against misinformation because when bad elements do raise their heads in whatever form within the community, it's propaganda, it's gold for Hindutva, it's gold for the enemies of the community, and of course they will use any opportunity and they will leverage and they will grow it into and spin it into the terrible piece of misinformation saying, look, all Sikhs are bad because they do this, and all Khalistanis are bad because they do that. That is how they work, and that is why we exist, James, to hopefully try and sift through the misinformation, to call it out when we see it, and to say, yes, there are bad elements, but they do not represent the community, and they certainly do not represent what Khalistan stands for. Khalistan represents a force for good, and that is what really matters, James. So yes, I think, as I say, lots of ingredients in that, but what matters is what is the final dish served up in the end, if you excuse the food metaphor on that one, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, for those who are interested in how the gangs really prey on the minority groups, the new arrivals to Canada, and those who are kind of isolated from others in their peer groups, take a look at some of the episodes that we've done in the past about youth gangs. We've covered that several times, Angus, and we will do in the future. We'll cover some more and look at the new technology through gaming systems, chat rooms, and all of that, how they're using that to influence and to recruit as well. So we'll look at that maybe in the next week or two on another episode. Tomorrow night we'll continue this theme, but for tomorrow night we will have a couple of pre-recorded clips just in case. I've got to go in and get a little operation on my throat tomorrow morning, so I should be good for tomorrow night, but just in case, I've got some backup plans, so I'll just sit here and look good. Back to you, Angus.
Hopefully back in fine voice, James. We'll look forward to that, and best wishes for that one. Right,
yeah,
James,
but there's probably a lot of people out there that hope I don't come back with a voice. No.
Never, James, never. Our loyal audience have been very supportive. Right, James, I'm going to circle back very quickly to the elections in Canada and just take a slightly different angle on this because, of course, it is big news. And the concern is what does this mean for the Sikh community in Canada? And by extension, actually, the Sikh community globally, because it is a large diaspora population. And what happens in Canada does also have repercussions across North America and, of course, here in the UK and Europe. So it does matter. And, of course, a lot of the issues that the diaspora are fighting for in Canada reflect the very same issues, certainly here in the UK and certainly in North America. So it does matter. Now, the World Sikh Organisation of Canada, as the election gathered pace, they did over the last few days release what they called their election guide. And they highlighted the key elements that matter to the Sikh community in Canada. And it's interesting because these, almost to a single element, reflect exactly what matters to the community, both in the United States, here in the UK, and of course all the other communities, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, or in Central Europe. And we're up against the time pressure as always, so I'll quickly zip through these. But basically, and again, they come as no surprise to our audience. Firstly, they talk about addressing Indian interference and targeting Sikhs in Canada. Yes, we've had the story of Hardeep Singh Najjar, but of course the ongoing transnational oppression, it is still ongoing. There are still those who are under these threats to life warnings where they have been warned by law enforcement and the intelligence agencies that there are still Indian operatives looking out for them. So again, it really matters. It is an ongoing issue, as we do know across the rest of the diaspora. It's addressing Hindutva extremism in Canada. We talked a lot about how Hindutva have infiltrated politics, law enforcement, all the social structures across North America. They are there. It is a concern. Now, we talk a lot about anti-Sikh hate crime. That is on the rise. It is on the rise not just in Canada, it is on the rise in the US, certainly here in the UK, and my next story, I'll talk about that in a moment. And then, of course, accommodation of Sikh articles of faith in work sites. Such a big topic that we talk about on a regular basis, James. Wearing of the kirpan particularly is the one issue here that does raise its head on such a regular basis. There is an ongoing battle, despite legislation saying it is okay, it's still coming up against problems in normal society. Of course, recognition of the genocide in 1984, again, a big topic across the diaspora. All the communities, wherever they are on the planet, are pressuring their own governments, particularly in the UK, just as much to recognise what happened in 1984 officially. Now, again, just as relevant here in the UK, but certainly in Canada, we talk a lot about international students coming to Canada, and it's supporting those. Of course, they are young, they are vulnerable, and they are targeted by a lot of discrimination. So it's ensuring that their rights are respected and that they get a relatively safe ride into their arrival in countries like Canada. But likewise, it does affect other diaspora communities as well. And then, of course, the Quebec Bill 21, James, which we have talked about specifically, this law that was passed in Quebec 6 years ago that prevents the wearing of articles of faith. And of course, this ongoing battle, this legal battle to say, look, you can't do this. Are we a secular community, or do we respect the right to wear articles of faith? And again, that's very much a hot topic around the world. Now, the Sikh Federation, with its affiliate in Canada, the Sikh Federation UK established a global affiliation where they established the Sikh Federation Canada and other countries to push for the rights for the community, the Sikh community in various countries. And then under the umbrella of the Global Sikh Federation, this is one of the bodies, the key bodies that is pushing the move for Khalistan, the body that will represent Khalistan at the United Nations, etc. And they, as part of that lead up to the election in Canada, they sent out, and this is an interesting insight into each of the political parties in Canada. What do they represent for the Sikh community? How powerfully do they represent the Sikh community? And again, as I said at the opening, the worry is we've lost Jagmeet Singh. He was a huge advocate, obviously, by his background for the Sikh community. He's gone now. So that means his advocacy, his representation of the Sikh community in Canadian politics has gone. That is really bad news. Now we have Mark Carney. He's taken over Trudeau. We do know Trudeau's track record. He was very positive. He was very supportive of the Sikh community. He wasn't perfect. There were a few issues in the past, but ultimately he stood up to Narendra Modi. He did stand up to transnational oppression. He called it out absolutely, vocally, loudly. He was not afraid. He stood up very courageously for that. But he's gone now. Carney's replaced him. Carney's agenda has been set out, certainly in the early days. He is prioritising building bridges. We worry, is he going to be building bridges with India? He comes from the World Economic Forum. They don't care so much about the Sikh community. They care more about other big issues. They're pushing the net zero agenda. They're pushing the globalization issues. In other words, these are big issues, controversial in themselves, but they're moving away from Sikh issues. In other words, I think the Sikh issues are going to drop down that ladder of priorities very quickly, and it worries me that I think the Liberals are going to move away from caring too much about the Sikh community and caring more about other bigger issues like globalization, anti-Trumpism, building bridges potentially with India or even Europe or whatever. So it worries me. What do these parties now represent for the Sikh community? Is the Sikh community going to be losing its voice and losing its influence? Well, they sent out, the Sikh Federation Canada sent out an interesting questionnaire to each of the three main parties, asking them particular questions and how they would respond and how they would represent those elements for the Sikh community. The first question they sent out was, what steps will you take to ensure the community's organisation receives adequate funding and resources to support capacity building and develop resilience against rising anti-Sikh hate? And of course, there's a lot about anti-Sikh hatred here. Now, unsurprisingly, all three parties came back and said, yes, we clearly acknowledge what's going on and we will do our very best, our level best. The Liberals said that, they clearly acknowledge the harmful impacts of anti-Sikh hate and advocated for ensuring adequate funding and resources for Sikh organisations to combat hate. The Conservatives actually followed suit and said actually pretty much the same thing, as did the NDP. Basically, it was all words and it's no surprise. Of course, we will do our very best. So it was and if I have any criticism about this questionnaire that the Sikh Federation sent, it's all you're going to get from a lot of this is they are words. There are a lot of words coming back. So even whatever question you ask, they're going to give you the answer that you're looking for. And that's my only criticism of this. And the Sikh Federation added their sort of commentary afterwards. And they said, look, Sikhs across Canada have called on the government to commit to dedicated funding streams that support the community to support capacity building and develop resilience against rising anti-Sikh hate. So, yeah, so what at the end of the day? I think sadly it's a little bit meaningless. When it came to civil liberties and religious freedoms, they said, look, given the alarming spike in hate crimes, do you agree that the government of Canada must take steps to ensure that racialised communities are not subject to intolerance and discrimination? Well, they gave this a score out of 10, and they broke it down into two elements. Firstly, do you agree with this statement in principle? Now, surprise, surprise, of course all three parties did, and all three parties scored 10 out of 10, because of course they agree. They're not going to say, no, we don't agree with this. So surprise, surprise, all three of them came in with the top score. Again, it's easy to say that. But they did do a little bit of analysis, and this is actually where it does matter. They analysed what each of the parties, what their actions meant. In other words, well, it's not what you say, it's what you're doing. So they said that support for concrete measures to combat intolerance and discrimination. Well, the Liberals scored 10 out of 10, so well done to the Liberals. The Conservatives, here's where it really matters, scored 0 out of 10. So the results, the actions of the Conservatives did not match their rhetoric. Surprise, surprise. And the NDP, unsurprisingly, again scored 10 out of 10. So the third question was, do you agree, this comes back to transnational oppression, do you agree that the government should take more steps to inform Canadians about all forms of transnational oppression? Now, again, do you agree with it in principle? Well, surprise, surprise, all three parties said, yes, of course we agree with it in principle. But again, when it comes to a more analytical approach by the Federation, the Liberals actually scored 5, surprisingly, bottom of the heap in terms of their actual concrete actions to increase transparency. So the Liberals, interestingly, actually came bottom of the pile. Just slightly above them with 7 out of 10 came the Conservatives, and there you go, the NDP came out with the full marks of 10 out of 10. So again, when you sum those, 15 for the Liberals, 17 for the Conservatives, and the NDP top of the heap there. Right. So as when they summarised the point scoring, the top of the heap came NDP. Is that going to change now that Jagmeet Singh's gone? It may well do. Slight concern there. And in bottom place, unsurprisingly, the Conservatives with 81 out of 100, and slap bang in the middle, the Liberals came in at 85 out of 100. So what does it mean? We don't really know. Again, it was a questionnaire. It was a relatively lightweight questionnaire. Again, what really matters, James, is what these parties are going to do going forward. And as I say, my big concern is that the Sikh community has lost now a lot of power and a lot of voice, politically speaking, certainly with the loss of Jagmeet Singh. And again, as I said in the intro, what does Carney represent? It worries me. I think the issues, these key issues that are referred to, those issues that I started off with, are those going to become mainstream issues in Canadian politics? Probably not, unless there is another event like Hardeep Singh Nijjar. God forbid that there is another high-profile assassination in Canada. I hope there certainly isn't. I hope India has now learnt its lesson and it's pulled back its troops and its operatives. We will see, but I think sadly it will take something like that, I think, now to swing Canadian politics and the Liberal Party back to vocalising significantly and with a high profile their representation and their support for the Sikh community, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And that's the sad thing, is that we see such an advocate for the Sikh community stepping aside. Of course, the important part now for any of our viewers or others who are a part of the NDP party is to make sure that they get their voices heard when it comes to the leadership race as to who's going to take over as the next leader of the NDP, and really try to make sure that it's someone that is going to take these issues seriously and give it a lot more than just lip service. And I think that's the big thing that we need to look at, is who is going to replace him and what are their priorities. But more again, just like this report that you've gone over, Angus, is that we need to watch what their previous actions have been, because that speaks louder than any of the words that they can string together to appease voters coming into the election. Now it's a different party. It's a different transfer of the dynamics there, so we need to really follow through on that, Angus.
Indeed. And all I would say is that knowing Sikhs, for what I know of the community, they are resilient. They will always bounce back from a knockback. And Jagmeet Singh, don't write him off yet. He might have lost his seat, but I have no doubt that Jagmeet Singh, being true to his heritage, will bounce back with a vengeance. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep our fingers crossed for his future. Right, James, time marching on. Let's rush through my second story. And here in the UK, we have a relatively new body that was founded back in 2020, 5 years ago. It's called Sikhs in Law. It is a body that was only inaugurated, actually, officially a couple of years ago. But it is the largest Sikh professional network of its kind. It represents the legal profession, and particularly the Sikh community within our legal profession. It ranges all the way from students, all the way through legal execs to solicitors, barristers, and all the way up to judges across the United Kingdom. Now, it does state that its core values of panth, integrity and advocacy means that they are dedicated to connecting, championing and supporting all of our members. So they do use their Sikh philosophy to stand up for not just their members, but also to advocate for the community, particularly within the legal profession. And they do hold a little bit of influence and power, and certainly within the legal profession they certainly do that. And the organisation does, as it says, seek to assist its members and students in professional development, but more importantly, raising the Sikh profile in the legal sphere and driving initiatives from the classroom, and they have a big targeting audience within the education sector to ensure that the children, as they grow up, understand more about Sikhi, but also about how they can grow their philosophy within the legal profession and across even into the corporate platform, the corporate sphere, in the boardroom as well. And Sikhs in Law emphasises its 4 core values being honesty, integrity, fairness and humility, as set out by the gurus to all its members. Now, why am I talking about the Sikhs in Law? Well, they have just issued a press release, and it's quite a powerful press release. They are very concerned about the rise of hate crime, that we have desperately seen a huge increase in hate crime, anti-Sikh hate crime specifically, across platforms like TikTok. And they have said that they have become acutely aware of religiously motivated hate campaigns targeting the Sikh faith, and specifically they do refer to TikTok accounts and live streams. I think we can guess, James, where this comes from, because again we talk about the online mobilised army of Hindutva who spend their every day trying to target and spread misinformation and hatred against the Sikh community for reasons that we talk about regularly. And Sikhs for Law have said that these campaigns are driven indeed by malice and hatred. They are, as they say, reprehensible and stand against the values of a just and tolerant society. And they then call upon Ofcom, that's our regulator of all media, to act against it, and indeed targeting TikTok itself to take the reports of this hate crime seriously and to address the hate crimes. I think they're being optimistic if TikTok are going to do anything about it. I think, as we've learned, James, platforms like TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all these things, they don't care. All they care about is ensuring they just get engagement. They get people on their platforms because engagement means money. So they are driven by very different values. So I think their appeal to TikTok will probably fall on deaf ears. TikTok will only do what it needs to do if it is regulated to do that. So who knows? Prove me wrong, but we will see. But as Sikhs for Law says, not only do these crimes poison community relations, but they also severely impact the mental well-being of law-abiding citizens. So there is a very legally based call for action from the Council of Sikhs in Law. Let's hope, James, that these platforms listen and that the regulator in the form of Ofcom does something about it, because it is a rising concern. I know it's not just here in the UK, it is spread across the diaspora globally, but certainly as the Khalistan movement is growing in momentum and force and weight, and its success is mounting, is that Hindutva is getting increasingly desperate. They are spreading their wings as far as they can. They are pushing the misinformation, they're pushing the hate crime, to try and get control again of the narrative, to try and turn it against the Khalistan movement, because they are now afraid. In fact, I would go as far as to say they are terrified of this Khalistan movement. They know it is winning the argument, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I think that it's an interesting time for TikTok, because I know that you're not a big presence on social media, but I do use all the different platforms quite frequently in terms of my presence. And I actually find TikTok to be the strictest when it comes to actually moderating and pulling a lot of things off of their platform and suspending people. So I do give them that much. And with that said, of course, they have a far way to go before I think that it's a safe environment or that they've addressed issues such as this. But I will say that they do definitely take it a lot more serious than the X, than Facebook and Instagram and the others. So I think that is one positive opportunity or reason for optimism there. One of the problems, though, is that I see with their battle with the government of the United States and their potential takeover of the platform outside of outside of China. I think that also is going to curtail or stall off any actions against these bad actors, such as the Hindutva extremists and the propagation machine that is the information flowing from the RA and the RSS and other misinformation campaigns that are out there, Angus.
Indeed. So we will, of course, call it out every time we see it. Right, James, rushing on now because the clock is counting down. Loads of comments to get through this morning, as always. 1S, 1 and 2 starts us off. And yes, you did correct me. When I talked about the 5 names at the establishment of the Khalsa, I did read them backwards. My apologies. I did actually say at the time, I realised as I read them out, I said I've got these back to front. So you're absolutely right, 1S, 1 and 2. Thank you for pointing that out. And indeed, as you've correctly listed them there, so thank you for that correction. Jasleen says, Gurdwara is open to all communities, and this is about the graffiti story on the Gurdwara that James, I think you covered on this. And as you rightly say, Jasleen, Gurdwaras are open to all, and it's astonishing that a Sikh who probably attends a Gurdwara would actually graffiti their own Gurdwara. Why on earth would they do that? It just doesn't make sense. It's likely, as you say, it's a prank from somebody from another community that doesn't even need to be named. I think you're absolutely right. We all know probably who was behind it. But as you rightly say, Justine, as we all know, soon Gurdwaras will have a Khalistan postcode on its signage. As you rightly say, Khalistan's in the bad, James.
Yeah, and just a quick context there is that the Gurdwara that was actually tagged was actually, they held their own Vaisakhi parade and events in the city of Vancouver, and they did not allow for the Khalistan movement to participate in that parade or in those events. And they wanted to keep it less political in terms of their Gurdwara and what their focus is on the community. So therefore, I think that it was somebody outside of the community that was just trying to, as they say, stir shit up, Angus.
Yeah, sadly, it does happen. Human nature, again, as we mentioned earlier. Manveer Singh, there seems to be a growing movement. Yes, we talked a lot about this, Sanatan Dharma. And Manveer has sent a very interesting comment about, basically how complex the subject is. And sadly, we don't have the time to even analyse, even on a superficial level. But yes, it is. It's been cited as being the core of the values that are promoted within Sikhi. It's, as you say, it is very India-centric, playing into the Indian state, the RSS agenda, basically trying to say that Sikhs are Hindus, which of course is not true. But as you say, people forget within the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, there are writings of Sufi Muslim saints and ideas, concepts that are referenced that originate in the Middle East. In other words, what you're saying is, of course, Sikhi does draw from different areas, different parts of humanity, different religious scriptures. And this is no secret. This does not mean that Sikhi is Hinduism or indeed is Islam. It is none of those. It is its own independent religion. Yeah. But like all religions, Christianity is the same. They all draw from different parts of human goodness, morality, which of course many religions have in common. So it's unsurprising that they do have a lot of this in common. And so, as you say, there have been some universal truths that have been spoken about all around the world over historical time. And yes, indeed, in other words, they've always existed, these ideas. These universal truths are present within the GDS and Sikhi. And basically, I think to sum up that, James, is saying, look, all religions actually do form a very similar core of morality, of human morality. Yeah. They're all just different takes on it, and they have their different interpretations of it. But ultimately, it's not surprising that they all draw from the same thing. And Manveer Singh, as you say, sorry for taking a little long. Take care and keep up the good work. Not at all. We appreciate your long, thoughtful and well set out comment, James.
Absolutely. And we've brought that before, that all different faiths, all different beliefs, I mean, you're going to have some crossover. You're going to have in the basic principles that we are all human. We want to not only be the best who we can be, but we want to encourage the best in others, and we want to have faith in others. And so, yeah, there's going to be some crossover, but I think that it is, from my experience, I think that Sikhi and practicing Sikhs are much more dedicated to the word of what is there and what is written and what they practice, as opposed to certain other religions that more take it as a guideline and can be, basically taken to their own context when it's suitable for the individuals. I don't see that same flexibility in Sikhi. I see a lot more devotion, dedication, and commitment. So.
Well said, absolutely right. 5AAB, we talked about the Patels, the FBI chief Patel. He is a Gujarati, and Siddharth Patel, he was the other FBI agent in, was it California, about that story, labelling a criminal, a Bishnoi criminal, as a Khalistani. So again, you're highlighting the fact that they're both from Gujarat. What do the Sikhs expect from two Hindus? Well, yeah, we do know, and as you reckon, they are in contact with Raw. Well, it's no surprise that Narendra Modi hails from Gujarat, as does Amit Shah, the Home Minister in India. It's almost Gujarati mafia. Lawrence Bishnoi is sitting in a Gujarat jail. You see the common theme here, James?
I do, and you know, at the Vaisakhi parade, there was a tractor that was manufactured in Gujarat, and I'll bet you that it has a higher level of principles, and we can trust it more than we can Modi.
So the conspiracy theories. Absolutely. And the conspiracy theories continue. We love a good conspiracy. And Sukhjit Panda says, look, back to the terrible events in Kashmir and Pahalgam, that shooting. Why do these things only happen when someone visits from the USA? Yeah, good question. Of course, Clinton arrived was about 20 odd years ago. And again, a similar terrorist attack. It always happens when US visitors, high profile visitors, visit India. And of course, that happened when J.D. Vance was visiting in India. And then Amakara, interesting this one, Pahalgam shooting started at 3:30 Indian Standard Time. The X account holder Baba Banaras, who often supports RSS propaganda, posted breaking news about this attack at 15:33. 3 minutes after the attack. How is this possible? There you go, James. Well, this has often come up, why RSS accounts, and this happened after the Najjar killing, it happened after the Avtar Singh Kandar death/killing here in the UK, where Twitter accounts in India of RSS Hindutva extremists post about these events literally minutes after, and sometimes actually in one case even before the event actually happened. So in other words, there is a link. The RSS, the implication here is the RSS are behind it, James.
Absolutely. We saw that incident where they were airing that video of the Canadian entertainer on I believe it was Vancouver Island that we covered not long ago, that the India station actually had the live feed from the shooters before it actually hit the local news here.
Indeed, and in fact, anybody who calls this out as nonsense, I only need to point you to the Chichen Pura massacre, where 35 odd Sikhs were murdered in cold blood by allegedly Islamic terrorists, which flew in the face of logic or evidence. But in fact, a whistleblower has actually spoken out recently. He is an Indian officer from the Indian Army who admitted that it was the Indian Army, under instructions from RAW, who actually perpetrated that killing of Sikhs under that massacre. So in other words, you can think about conspiracies, but conspiracies in many cases are actually true. So before people dismiss that out of hand.
Yeah.
And final set, James. Humanity says, thank you. Well, thank you, Humanity, for your comment. The UK will be important for Khalistan, as it was the British who overthrew the Sikh Raj and annexed Punjab. They also set terms and conditions of succession in that dreadful partition event. In other words, as you rightly say, they owe the Sikhs big time to put right a dastardly wrong. You are so right, Humanity. Currently, they're not seeing beyond economic ties, which, remember, can change very quickly. Indeed, they can. In other words, James, this is all about, it's about time the British said, look, hang on a second, this isn't about trade deals or money, because things can change in the blink of an eye economically. What really matters is the honour debt, this debt of honour that the British owe the Sikh community, because we annexed Punjab, we defeated the Sikh Empire, we sadly buried the Sikh Empire after so many years of great success and democratic rule. So we have a debt of honour after particularly what the Sikh community have done in return for the British. They have joined the British Army, they have come to Britain and contributed massively, disproportionately positively to British society. So we, as a result, owe it as a debt of honour to the Sikh community to establish Khalistan, to lend the British weight, which is not inconsiderable, to do what we can as a nation to help the establishment of Khalistan, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and I will leave it at that for interest of time. That I agree with you 100%.
Indeed, and SSI Singh says, awesome programme, great show. Well, thank you very much. An awesome comment. And you say there are no fake Sikhs. Well, I don't know. We often talk about fake Sikhs, James, and the evidence has, ultimately it comes down to how do you define a fake Sikh or a Sikh? Who knows? But it was interesting that your take on this, that there are no fake Sikhs. But James, I think we have had several stories where we have said, that there are those bad actors who are pretending to be Sikhs. And I think it's unambiguous that they could be called fake Sikhs, James.
Yeah, exactly, but they are really not Sikhs. They are people they are imposters. So again, it's do you say potato or do you say potato?
Indeed. And Jagmeet Singh signs us off, and I don't fully understand this, but I think the epithet is clear. Scott Vera and Jar Virguru Virta Parvan, whatever. I think maybe that's Waheguru, something to do with Waheguru. My Punjab is improving, James. But what matters, it says, God bless you and thanks, brothers. Well, absolutely. I do see us all as brothers aligned in a common goal, James. I think we all do align, and we all are working together across the community, across the diaspora, wherever you are in our audience. And I do know we have viewers in the Punjab, particularly Patiala. In fact, somebody commented from Patiala, I think yesterday. Welcome. But we are, as you say, Chima saying, we are basically brothers in arms in this fight, James.
Absolutely, and we are proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely we are. But on that wonderfully positive note, we will bring Perspectives to a close for another day. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. As always, we've been receiving some really fascinating comments, so don't stop there. Keep them coming. Do let us know your thoughts and let us point to some directions of things that you'd like us to talk about and research. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellotv.com. If there's something you'd like to bring to our attention directly that you don't want to put in the public domain, as many of you have been doing. Indeed. But thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you to our audience. It is a goodbye from me, goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.